Hey everyone, welcome to ZEN and TECH, our weekly podcast focused on centering your inner geek and using technology to help you deal with the stresses of your connected life. I'm Rene, and the host for your show is Georgia. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that while Georgia is a therapist, she's not your therapist. Everything said or implied in this episode is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and shouldn't be taken in any way as a replacement for personal, professional care. Hit it, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Georgia.
How's it going?
It's going really well.
You look so Game of Thrones. Can I say that?
But thank you. Very, very cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So last week, man, that was not last week. It was 2 weeks ago. That was one of the best episodes ever, caretaking. It was just, I would say, life-changing. I'm not one for hyperbole, but I think if it applied to you, that was just a fantastically transformative episode.
It's interesting because that episode was about caretakers, and most people who are caretakers they just figure they're being nice. They don't even know. And I deal with a great deal of people who are caretakers. It is not a great thing. So take a peek at that show, and it will give you the starting guide to getting rid of it.
Nice. So what do you have for us this week? What is your sequel?
Well, it's not truly a sequel, but it is about living a more honest life. And I read this article, it's from The Guardian, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a beautiful article and a helpful article. It sounds like it's going to be depressing. It's not going to be depressing, but it's the top 5 regrets of people that are dying. And I spoke before about what I learned when I worked with the elderly, and it was probably one of the greatest gifts that I was ever given, and that was that when I was working, the only thing that they cared about was spending more time with those that they loved. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about driving a faster car or looking better. All that they wished if they could go back and do more of is spend more time with their loved ones, their kids, and enjoy those moments. And I thought that this article was a really good article about some cues on how to live your life so that you will not have some of these regrets when you
get hit by a bus.
That. Well, you never know what's going to happen. So you might as well live every single day to the fullest because, sometimes times get tough, but in the end, you have a certain amount of power in that as well.
Well, that was always one of my things. Like I mentioned the bus because very early on in life, I came to this conclusion that if I ever got hit by a bus, the last thing to cross my mind would be like, oh, I wish I'd spent less time with the people I cared about. I wish I'd done more stupidity. It just that seemed like a very. I hate to always go back to this, but that Stanford speech by Steve Jobs after he was diagnosed with cancer, and when he said he looked himself in the mirror and every illusion, everything that he thought was important was just cut away, and he felt like he was standing there naked, and he knew that every decision was important, and he was no longer going to live his life trivially. And I thought that was that was a remarkable insight that many of us wait far too long to attain.
Right, exactly. This all comes from an Australian nurse. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying, and she worked in palliative care. And so she would record people, and she recorded what people had said. And so I thought that I would go through it. So the first regret was that I wish I had the courage to live a true life to myself, not the life that others had expected of me. And I went, oh, that's awesome. What a fabulous thing to try to live your life in an honest way. Not the way that society tells you to do it, but in the way that you would really want to do it. And that's sometimes scary.
Well, this goes back to that saying that we talked about many episodes ago, that other people's expectations aren't your obligations.
Exactly. And sometimes that means going against the grain, and people will not be happy about that. I had actually, one of my people at one point wanted to travel, and so they're like, I'd love to travel. They didn't have like a family or kids at this stage, and they wanted to travel the world. And again, my strong feelings are to live your dreams as long as you can eat and there's a roof over your head and you don't have to worry. You're not going to be sacrificing yourself. What a wonderful thing to be able to do. And so in the end, they did. They traveled all around for a full year and then decided to get a job and felt that they had peace with that. And sometimes it doesn't just mean about what you're going to do, but also who you're going to spend it with. If
So
you are unhappy in your life, you know,
can I ask a dumb question? And I shouldn't call it dumb. I think it's an important question. This stuff, like when you hear it, it makes a lot of sense, but it just seems that unless you're faced with extraordinary circumstances, life gets in the way. Like you forget what's important. One trivial thing, or not trivial, but one non-important thing, one work-based thing, one annoyance, one inconvenience after another piles up in front of you. And it's very easy to slip back into that almost wasteful routine.
well, I'm going to say that my, you know, I think that that's all about fear. In the end, if you're not happy doing something and you decide to keep on doing it, there's a fear that's holding you back, a fear, a worry, that you're going to disappoint people, that you're going to go against the norm, that people aren't going to accept this, that you're going to fail at it, that you're going to abandon people, that the world is going to get you because you deserve it to be gotten for some reason, or that you don't trust yourself and you don't believe that you can actually make a difference to that. And I think that any decision that you make out of fear, even if it's the right decision, is the wrong decision.
Is it? I mean, you did an episode a while ago that was really, really awesome on mindfulness, and it seems to me that we sometimes it's not even fear; it's just either laziness, complacency, or unawareness. We just don't realize what we're doing, and we just keep repeating things that aren't that important.
I think that sometimes it's habit. I think that most of the time it isn't. If you're actually unhappy, it might be, again, I think that complacency leads to deaths of the soul. So I don't like that anyways. But usually when you want to change something, you want to live your dreams, people that are not living the life of what they had hoped to, rarely is it because they're lazy. Usually it's because they're saying they're lazy, but really they're scared. So even when I was a procrastinating perfectionist, and so I wouldn't do my paper. So I wouldn't do my paper. I wouldn't do it, but it was just because I was afraid of not being able to do as good of a paper as which I'd hoped to.
So I guess it depends on scale, because when we talk about regrets, I tend to think that there are these huge, maybe not huge, but really important things, and again, I keep going back to this. When we're not talking about it, it just seems that the really important things kind of float out of your mind. There's so much noise every day that it's hard to focus on what's important.
Right. Right. It's you need to be honest with yourself, and you need to not fill yourself with all kinds of clutter. You need to make sure that you have a space to live as well.
Yeah, like that was an episode we did as well, putting yourself number one, right? And that played into the caretaking thing as well.
Yeah. Someone asked in the chat room, they said, Georgia, what about the people who don't know what the life is they want to live? It's interesting because those existential type of questions used to keep me up at night. I'm not even kidding. I would say, what am I doing? I think that I could do something and be good at it, but what in the world that might be? And I would actually wake up in the night with, now I know, was anxiety attacks. I did not know that then, but I had anxiety over that exact question. And now I have a simple answer. It's not really simple because you do have to think about it, but it is about, I say, instead of thinking for the rest of your life, which is a very scary thought, think about a 1 year or a 5 year plan. That's it. And then what I say is just do something that you think you will like more than what you're doing now. Spend 5 years to get there and then change. So I've actually had a lot of different careers. I've done all kinds of wild, amazing, crazy, scary things. Just even doing this here came out as, do you want to try out to do a podcast, see how this is going to happen? And then I enjoyed it. It was fun. And, out of pity, people kept me around. So
No, I mean, that's no, yeah.
yeah.
No, but the thing is, I think that's brilliant, and you describe that in organization too. Is that if something is huge and intimidating, you can break it up into smaller, less intimidating pieces. You can do, instead of running a mile, you can take one step.
Exactly, and it's all about taking little tiny steps in a different direction. We never know if it's the right direction, but in the end, just take a direction. And it's better to take a direction and find out it's wrong than to not take any direction at all.
It's like those old school video games where you weren't quite sure where the corridor is, so your character would walk up, knock against it, you'd walk over,
Oh, I
knock
was
it.
so horrible in those video games. I would be worried that I would get out and I wouldn't have found everything, all of the little, treasures in the level. So I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go in that hallway because I'm going to go into this one so I, can get
But I
all
think
of
the
the.
point is that you had to keep hitting the wall so that eventually you'd find the corridor. And if you were too afraid to hit the wall, you'd never find it. So even if you make mistakes, you learn, correct, and keep going.
Yes, you move along. You move along. You have to give up the perfectionism or your own ideals in order to move to the next level.
Yep.
The next one was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Ouch.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's a very strong statement.
Yeah.
We are in our now, like with our happy tech, we're constantly, being able to be reached, being able to be done with that. And we're working now more hours for less pay. It's not okay.
And we're thinking less of the people who don't work as crazy.
Yeah, even for sleep, I tell people, well, you know what? Are you getting enough sleep? No one that I ever see is saying to me, yes, I am getting 7.5 hours of sleep. And it's so sad because sleep is so vastly important to a good sense of being, or having fun, or doing other things. Like could I work? I chose to take one day off of work so that I can be more at home, so I can spend time with family and friends and do things that I care about. Is that a cost to my economics? Yes. But I'm never going to be able to get these years back. I'm never going to be able to get these years back. And like, it would be great if we could work when, later, like when we're really young and it doesn't really matter to us, we're really old. But these are our best years of our life, and we're spending them slaving away for someone else, for the man.
Now, you said work as hard, but does working as hard always mean working as much? Or is there people who just they may not work a lot, but they work far too intensely when they do?
I don't think that intensity is what we're talking about right now. Some people love to be exceptionally intense in what they're doing, but I'm talking about time, like straight up time. Even if you're enjoying it, it's a job that you love. So again, type A, so researchers, doctors, people that work at factories or mills, or
Bloggers.
yes, bloggers, lawyers. You might love your job, but you don't want to have all of your self-esteem stuck in one fabulous, lens mug. You want to be able to have many of them, because this one might break, and then what are you going to do? You don't know where to pick up the pieces. Plus, the people around you need you. You need to live a little bit. And in order to live, you need to challenge yourself to do different things. And those will be the things that you look back on. It will not be how many more days. It won't be that extra $100 that you have in your pocket. Sometimes it's just not worth it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you've made some really good tips over the past time. Like, for example, people who never leave their desk, they eat at their desk. They're just constantly at their desk, and it destroys you over time.
Yeah. I think it's actually horrible and pervasive. It's so very scary. It's so very scary, the amount of people that I see that are just slaving their life away, and then it's just done. And so try not to do that as much as you can. The next one is, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings.
Yeah.
Speaking up for yourself. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm actually kind of shocked because, again, I guess in my field, a lot of people that are coming to me are those that are already expressive, that are able to say, I love you, I'm sorry, I wish I didn't do that, I can do better, those type of things. Or telling someone before it comes to a very difficult situation how they feel about things. I forgive you for something that happened. I wish that I hadn't done this. I made the wrong choice. Thank you.
Well, do you remember what was that that movie that came out recently? The woman with the dragon tattoo?
Yes.
No, I'm not going to say any spoilers, but there's one line in the movie where the guy says basically that, do you know how many people will basically fall into any trap possible just because they don't want to seem rude or offensive? Like, he doesn't have to put a gun on them. He just had to.
Amazing scene.
Yeah, you just had to ask them, and they would do almost anything. You didn't need a gun.
No matter what, if you ask politely enough, everyone will do it even if it goes against their better
Like you could be
judgment.
afraid. You could think like your life is at risk, but you don't want to offend somebody, so you'll do it.
I know, and I thought to myself, because and I think that's a really amazing point, because I teach this more for when I teach self-defense than for anything else. But I always say that listen to your gut. And if you're worried about, like, someone tells you to go into, and this is important for you to teach to your girls more probably than, well, young boys as well, that if your gut tells you this, like screams, this is really wrong, listen to it. Your gut is ready. We are built with innate spider senses. Spider-Man is supposed to listen to his spider senses. So are we. We don't. We usually say, oh, I don't want to be rude or seem
Yeah.
lame or horrible. And so even for like driving, I have some great little, I'm going to tell them now because I don't want to have this float out. And if we do a self-defense one, we'll deal with that as well. But say that I'm feeling exceptionally nauseous. I think I'm going to be sick. It's a great lie. You can do that even for if someone's like driving their car and driving erratically. No one wants you to puke in their car. So you just say, wow, I'm really feeling nauseous. Can you drive a little slower? Because I think, and then you can do the little, like I'm going to puke. They will drive slower or let you out. Say, you have to let me out. I think that I'm going to vomit. That will get you out of any situation. If you are, worried about seeming rude to someone, they're like, come on, come downstairs the attic. I want to show you something. And you're like, and you say, well, no, I have to, if you're a young child and you're like, no, I have to tell my parents. And they're like, no, I can't do it. Say, I think I'm going to be sick. I better go to the washroom, and then hightail it out of there.
I think it applies to like a lot of situations. For example, going back to the work thing, people will just agree to do crazy amounts of work or shifts because they always have this fear of offending or being seen as less than or not the best or not a team player. Or
That definitely goes to the basic fear. The fear of disappointing others is a caretaking skill.
Yeah.
It's a horrible skill because others will just take advantage of you. The over assertive people will grab one of those caretakers, and it will be a really bad situation for the caretaker.
Yeah, so this is actually really profound. This one, I didn't think about it as much until you said it, but there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah. To be true to yourself, I think, is where it comes down to. Is I wish I had been more true to myself.
Yes.
And less afraid of speaking up. And I think to myself a lot. I do a lot of social anxiety, and I say to myself, because I'm doing this social anxiety, I'm often going up to strangers to help other people overcome their social anxiety, and giving a compliment or asking them a question that I normally wouldn't. And I'm wondering, why don't I, if I think to myself, wow, she is beautifully, she has a beautiful, watch, or that man is very well dressed. Why am I not like sharing with someone when they've done something good? Or I think that that's very kind the way you spoke, or exceptionally polite. Thank you very much. Why am I choosing to not share that with someone else? There's something about having the courage to be able to do that.
To be authentic to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Number 4 is I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Yeah, and often I have like something happens to a friendship and one person hurts the other person's feelings, and then it's like an awkward amount of time that you haven't spoken, and then you just don't. I think in 90% of the cases that friend would be just happy to hear from you. No one cares about whatever was the fight or argument or issue that came up, and often it's a regret. And I remember the funeral of, what are the two very famous actors, and they did all of those movies. He had the I forget. Anyways, it was two famous actors. They worked in a whole bunch of movies together. They had a rift, and one of them died, and the other one went to the funeral and like started screaming and yelling and broke down on the floor because they had wished that they could have spoken to them one more time.
And I would take this beyond like just friends. I mean, there's just so many situations where the longer you take to do something, the more awkward, insurmountable, difficult time seems to become a barrier. And I think sometimes it gets to the point where the time itself becomes the issue, and not like the original thing kind of fades away, and just the amount of time you waited becomes the problem.
Yeah. And the last one is, I wish that I had let myself be happier. That's a really strong one.
What does that mean? People are not allowing themselves to be happy? They feel guilty about it?
People feel guilty about being happy. Yeah, and it's sad. I see it a lot. People that feel either one thing, that if they're happy, they feel guilty for being happy because other people around them are not happy, or they are scared to be happy because they're worried about when it's going to leave them.
Oh, well, that's a common thing. I think that people have this sort of idea of karma or of the universe. Maybe it's that we like to think it's like a conceit that we're that important, that we think that if we have happiness, the universe will punish us with equal amounts of sadness, or that if we recognize it, it'll be taken away from us.
This happens a lot in cultures where there was war or poverty or hardship. And there's an actual reason for that. Because in a lot of different places, if you were doing really well and you said, how, there's a war going on, there's poverty, you're like, oh no, I'm doing great. Everyone's like looking at each other like, oh, let's rob that person, let's take from that person. They have it really well, and they're going to want ill will to them. There's also, yes, Salk has mentioned that there's also survivor guilt, but this is a little bit different than that and a little bit more pervasive because it's a cultural thing taught down. So you will meet people that no matter what, no matter how well they're doing, they just came back from a trip to Mexico, and they're still talking about how they're poor and they can't do this, and they're complaining constantly. They just can't allow themselves to be happy. That is very, very damaging. And often they're also pessimistic and hard on themselves, highly critical.
I think sometimes like you just said, our culture punishes happiness. Like if we see a happy person, rather than taking that as a cue that we should be happy ourselves, we kind of want to make them miserable so that we don't think there's people happy out there when we're not.
Right, which I'm going to add one in, pick friends that are not going to do that. That's just a horrible, horrible personality trait. If you have someone that actually wants you to be unhappy, that is not able to be happy with you, or is spiteful or jealous all the time, find better friends, please.
That's one of my other favorite lines. If you can't change the people around you, change the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So,
what about skipping on the beach, Georgia? We just want to skip on the beach.
Enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Enjoy it now. That's definitely back to the Zen, the main thing about.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and we dealt with that a few episodes ago. Someone asking, family is not as easy to change as friends.
There are some, okay, this is a rough one. So what if your family sucks? What then? From the chat room.
Your mother, your sibling, your wife.
There are two things that I say. One is that you have to not carry other people's loads. So just because they're unhappy doesn't mean you have to fix it. Doesn't even mean you have to listen to it. It's your choice whether you do either of those things. You can change the subject. You can talk about something else. Some people make bad choices and then they want to complain about it, but other people just want to complain. So I will often just listen, say, wow, that's really horrible. But if it is weighted on you, if just listening or even hearing their voice on the other side of the phone and you know that they're about to start complaining kills you inside, like right away, change the subject. If it's actually damaging, they are negative, hard to talk to, something that would be more than just, it's a hardship on me, but something that they're critical, mean, and make your life miserable because of that, then you may have to talk to them and set down some rules about the conversation. So if they've been divorced, say, you know what, you cannot talk bad about the other parent in front of me, which they never should do. And please, if you ever do get divorced, please don't do that to your kids. Don't let them know about the divorce, know what's happening. Oh, daddy won't pay for this. This is why you can't have it. No, that is your hardship. Do not visit that upon your children. They will hate you later for it. It is not fair. They did not pick each other. They deserve to be loved and love each parent. You can't make your child hate the other parent. It's not okay. Sorry, little sidebar.
No, I mean, so that's setting boundaries, but is it also to understand what your level of control? I mean, because we sometimes think that we can control and change people, but we can only really control and change ourselves.
We can in our reaction to them.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's some cases where it is so damaging that people decide to sever ties. It's not one of the main things that I would ever say to do, even if your father or mother or sister, brother is really horrible. I think that you should try to find any other solution, because if they, again, talking about regret, they happen to die and you have severed ties and you haven't done it, that's a huge regret to carry. It's a huge burden. And most people say, no, I won't care when they're really hurt or really upset. But in the end, as years go by, they will, and they will wish that they had not. And I see that a lot, and you can't repair that. You can't go back and fix it. At least if you can say, I tried and they were still horrible, it's not the guilt that you will carry. They were horrible and they traumatized you, but the guilt to say that I didn't talk to them, and I wish, even though my father was hard on me and, beat me and did this, did that to me, at least I had said goodbye and it's okay, or I forgive you. It's a personal thing. It's not because of them that I would say that. It's just because of how much damage it does to the person themselves. Sometimes it's worth it, and it's meant to be. And I know people that have decided to sever ties because they had to, and I understand that as well. But it's not a light subject.
Well, I think also it's not always about them. I mean, just for yourself, if you can come to some level of acceptance and you can let go of the burden that you're carrying, even if they still choose to have issues, you can just accept. I can't say you can accept them, but you can accept the reality of what the situation is. And sometimes that is enough to let you move on.
And to know that as long as you make a choice, even if it's the bad choice, it's your choice. That's a certain amount of control. And sometimes your choice will be to stay there and suffer because that's the best decision. That's okay too.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Georgia. How could you possibly make homework out of this?
I would say try to not regret these things. Homework, more like life work. But the first one out of all of them is the most important.
What was that?
It's
Sorry.
amazing. The first one is, I wish I had the courage to live a true life, a life that is true to myself.
So maybe we should try to be more authentic this week.
More authentic. I love that. I love that. And not worry and not feel shy or ashamed, even when others try to make us that.
And you had excellent advice a few episodes ago about just taking a pause. And I think that if this is something that you want to deal with, taking a pause before you react and trying to figure out how you really feel about something could be very helpful.
Very much so.
All right, awesome. Georgia, where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB, and you can also find me on the website www.zenandtech.tv.
Nice. And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find both of us at Zen and Tech or at www.zenandtech.tv. We are here every second week talking about centering your inner geek and de-stressing your connected life. If you haven't already, please go to iTunes. Please subscribe to the show. Please leave a rating and a review. It helps iTunes feature us, which means we can find more people to have these frankly wonderful conversations with. For more of our shows, go to mobilenations.com/shows. And Georgia, thanks once again for finding this article and sharing it with us.
You're welcome.
And we'll put it in the show notes so everybody can read it.